Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. It's your host, Kaylee here. I'm actually very excited for our conversation today, and I hope that this episode doesn't just inspire you a little, but actually encourages you to shift the way that you think about safety's role in your growth. So to share a little bit of context behind this topic, my social media manager reached out to me this past week asking if I wanted to partake in the 2016 swipe post trend. And first of all, I was pretty emotional. Honestly, thinking back to a decade ago, 2016 was one of the most monumental years of my life. It was the year I started KLC, and it was also the year that my brother passed away. It actually made me emotional thinking about what have I been doing for the past decade, and just obviously recounting and reliving the fact that 10 years had gone by, an entire decade. And I asked myself if I thought my life was truly better or worse because of the decision I made to take the risk to bet on myself and start my own business. And while I can't necessarily ever know where I'd be today had I chosen the alternative path, most certainly in a CEO role somewhere, no doubt, the fact that I chose growth over safety, I couldn't be more proud of myself for. I feel like that's truly the real flex. Because what I've come to realize is that most people miss out on real growth potential because they romanticize growing safely. Let me explain. I was recently sharing stories with a leader on my team about what it was like climbing the corporate ladder in corporate America. I was hired by Bayer Healthcare, the company that makes the aspirin, for a sales role in their diabetes division a month even before I graduated college. So as soon as I graduated, I was on to my big girl job, and I couldn't think of a more secure career opportunity. I had a clear path to the next promotion, a salary, benefits, the prestige of being able to say I worked for a company with such pedigree and reputation. I drove a company car. I was earning a big salary and had an expense account. And there was this unspoken promise that if I perform, I'll be protected. I was thriving. And I ended up taking an underperforming territory, ranked last place in the country out of 150, and turned it around to become one of the highest performing in the company in 5 years. I was given all kinds of recognition, salary bumps and special teams project opportunities. And then year 6, the company fell short of their promised targets. And the board, of course, hires McKinsey Consulting to come in and restructure the organization. Anybody who's been there, you know the drill. I'll never forget. It was a Wednesday in February. We were told not to go out in the field to work that day because we needed to be home to take the calls that were coming to the sales force from HR because the company was going to be laying off a large portion of employees from the company. I was a star employee. Obviously, I was continuing to build to the number 1 territory in the nation. I had secured strong relationships with top hospitals and private practice physicians in LA. And I was on a mission to do some big things. And I knew the restructuring call, it just wasn't meant for me. So of course I went out and worked business as usual. So sure enough, at 1 p.m. that day, my cell phone rang and I looked down and it is a 914 area code. My stomach dropped. That was Tarrytown, New York, the headquarters of Bayer Healthcare. I recognized these digits instantly because I had just flown out to New York weeks earlier to meet our CEO for breakfast so she could, quote unquote, pick my brain about what was working and what needed her attention to support the sales force. Looking back, I think she was inheriting more than updates from me. But anywho, so my phone's ringing. I answer the phone. Hello. And on the other end, hi, Kaylee, it's Debbie Barcella in HR. How are you today? And I kind of snarked back at her. I think I was in shock. And I said, well, I guess the answer to that depends on why you're calling, Debbie. And she started talking, and the shock really kicked in, pretty much disassociated from the rest of her words. But bottom line was I was losing my job. I really thought at the time I was invincible. I saw manager positions being eliminated, reps being let go, but somehow I thought I knew that would never happen to me. Just blind naivety, I guess. And that was the day I realized that safety, it's conditional and it's also limiting, because the reality is the targets will keep moving. If you're working for a business that is publicly traded or backed by ambitious investors, there's typically one goal, and that is to hit numbers. Whether you are achieving your assigned goals in an individual or not, if the company underperforms, they have to look at ways to increase profit margins by cutting costs. And when you're a top performer, you're an expensive line item on a P&L. And I learned that very quickly. I learned that my employment and unemployment in a large company was transactional, not personal, regardless of how personal the work was for me. If you're tired of being the primary breadwinner in your practice, you're exactly who I created this month's Female Founder Forum for. On January 28th, I will be joined by 3 powerhouse multi-location practice CEOs who have cracked the code on building a booked out injector, one that patients request, trust, and rebook with, without everything flowing through them first, because the goal isn't for you to be the most in-demand provider forever. The goal is to build a team that can carry demand with you. So in this live 90-minute panel session, we are going to talk about the dilemma of hiring help, but still doing too much of the heavy lifting, marketing, ordering inventory, responding to DMs, taking way too many patients, and often fixing the gaps when your provider schedule isn't full. We're going to break down the exact framework that turns a new or underutilized injector into a consistently booked, highly requested provider. So we'll cover the systems that create real capacity so you're not the bottleneck, the positioning that builds trust and demand for your team members, not just you, and the client experience strategies that turn one-time visits into loyal rebooking patients across your entire practice. This isn't about tactics that you have to micromanage. Oh, no. It's about learning how to think and lead like a CEO so your business can grow without requiring more of you. If this is a problem you've been trying to solve quietly, I want you in the room. You can register at klcconsultants.com/founder forum, or you can head down to the link in show notes and register there. If you are a Fierce Factor Society member, by the way, your admission is free. So take a look out in your momentum guide this week for a link to register there. And I cannot wait to see you there. So during that same conversation I was having with my team member, she asked me, why do you think so many women associate big companies with security and small companies with risk? It's interesting because I think we have been conditioned by corporate America to think like that. They gloat security and 401ks and insurance and longevity as if because they've been in business 50 years, they are a safe place to work. They have familiar structures. There's a system for everything. There's no room to fail. And let me tell you, they have mastered the art of social permissions and attaboys. Do exactly what we tell you to do, and you'll be praised for it. But here's what's happening and what I was signing up for in reality: a structured box to operate in and a growth runway that was predicated on the slim probability of my boss getting promoted and then choosing to promote me. I was opting into a growth at all cost operating model that was being governed by investor pressures. The goal was to hit aggressive numbers versus building a sustainable business. In these environments, layoffs are seen as strategy, not, oh, I failed because I had to lay my people off. It's just part of the drill. And the irony of my situation was that the actual risk was playing it safe. And I see this play it safe mindset show up for women when they build their own businesses. And quite frankly, when they hire people who work for them, wanting massive growth, but settling on the cheapest employee, delaying leadership investments because it's easier just doing the work themselves, waiting to take bold, messy action because it feels risky. But here's what my own journey has taught me about growth, risk, and responsibility since 2016. Taking that leap of faith to bet on myself wasn't the unsafe choice. It was the most responsible decision I could have made because it put me in the driver's seat. Sure, my responsibility increased, but so did my agency. I got to call the shots on how we grow and on what we prioritize as a company. The goal doesn't have to be to turn up the volume on explosive growth at the risk of compromising my employees and their livelihood. And I have one investor to return dividends to, at least for right now. And that investor is me. When I set out on my career journey in 2005, I didn't have a strong female mentor or role model that could have these important conversations with me. I just knew, hey, get a 401k and you got a retirement set up for yourself. And that's the responsible thing to do. And many of my female colleagues align on this truth. If we could impart wisdom on the generations behind us, we'd tell them to take the calculated risk. It's certainly not the advice our mothers and fathers gave us. Because when you stay in your comfort zone, you cannot grow. There's a story that I came across recently that Sahil Bloom posted about, sort of in a parable, and it really stuck with me. And it's about a man who found a cocoon of an emperor moth and brought it home so he could watch it transform. One day, a small opening appeared, and that moth began the painful process of forcing its body through the narrow opening. Hours passed as it struggled, pushing and fighting, but it couldn't seem to break free. So, feeling bad for it, the man gently cracked the cocoon to help. What he didn't realize was that the struggle itself was essential. That pressure forces fluid from the moth's body into its wings, allowing it to fly. So without the struggle, the moth emerged weak and ultimately permanently unable to fly. This lesson is simple but quite confronting. The very discomfort we try to avoid is often the thing that makes us strong enough to carry what we're asking for. Growth doesn't come when things are easy. It comes when we create intentional tension, when we put ourselves in a pressure cooker. What can feel like a step backward is often the exact move that builds the skills, the confidence, and self-trust required for your next level. The detours, the discomfort, the moments where you're learning from the ground up, those are all experiences that create real momentum and eventually move you far ahead, both financially and in fulfillment. So if you're sitting in a dead-end job, the real risk isn't stepping away. It's staying somewhere that no longer challenges you to grow. I want every woman to ask herself this important question when she's seeking safety. Is the choice I'm making actually safer, or is it just more familiar? Because you can't tell me that you have big, audacious goals, but then optimize for comfort and security. Don't let the myth of safety hold you back from discovering your greatest potential. Very often, the safest thing you can do is bet on yourself. Take it from me. Okay, leader, that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening, and I will chat with you same place, same time next week.
Listen, leader, if you're vibing with me here, hang tight because I have a brand new resource for you. You are a successful, confident, powerful woman who just isn't into being average. No, you have a calling, and part of that calling is requiring you to level up. And I know that if you're working to cross the next $1 million milestone in your business, you need to be in the right circles. And perhaps that's why you found us. I'd love to invite you to join The Blueprint, a weekly resource for inspired, provocative thinkers who are taking this conversation to the next level. Get access to free business tools, podcast supplements, guideposts, and direct communication with me and my expert team. And of course, a masterfully curated circle of women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetics and wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to klcconsultants.com/blueprint. It's time to elevate. See you there, goddess.